Welcome to Closing Day. My name is Jeff Delgrand and I am your host. Closing Day is a show all about real estate. We cover everything here from buying, selling, financing, refinancing, staging, appraising. Anything you think about real estate, we're going to cover on this show. Now our goal in this show is to be educational and inspirational, have a little bit of fun, and leave you with some tips that will help save you time, money, and hopefully make the whole real estate experience more enjoyable for you. Now today, we're going to talk about mortgage rules. And to help me with this, my guest is Dwight Trafford, Principal Broker of the Mortgage Center here in Orangeville. Welcome, Dwight. Thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Dwight is also my boss, so I'm extremely honored to have him on the show. He's been in the business for, how many years now, Dwight?
29 years.
29 years. So he knows a whole lot more than I do about this. But what we're going to talk about is the more recent changes in the mortgage business. We hear about these new mortgage rules, these stress tests, and for most people that's like a different language. So today what we're going to do is sort through this and translate this into a language we all understand. So Dwight, can you tell us a little bit about mortgage rules? What's happened through the years?
Yeah, through the years. So if you go back even 10 years, the mortgage world was really the wild, wild west. And pretty much everything went, and lenders did what they wanted to. They would, if they felt comfortable with a deal, or if the underwriter just really liked it, then they could do a lot of things.
Yeah.
And that really did not have a significant impact on the Canadian economy or the Canadian mortgage market, because our arrears have always been extremely low, probably lowest in the world.
Oh, really?
And it is today.
Yeah.
So lenders did what they want to do, but then we had the collapse in the U.S., and that did affect our economy, and it scared a lot of foreign investment from investing in banks that were doing a lot of mortgages. So the Canadian government, the Office of the Superintendent of Financial Institutions, the Bank of Canada, Finance Canada, CMHC, they decided to start implementing new rules. And these started coming in probably 8 or 10 years ago. And they were really shrinking the box as to who could get a mortgage and who would qualify for a mortgage, making it more difficult and more difficult and more difficult. So lately, the latest impact that they've done is with the stress test, which just means that should rates go up 2%, we still want you to be able to afford the mortgage. Okay. Now, they're loaning a lot of money in these mortgages. I mean, getting a $400,000 or $500,000 mortgage, that is a lot of money. Right?
Yes. Yeah.
So they really want to be comfortable that it's not going to impact your life dramatically. Now, the truth is, the Canadian government, Finance Canada, they don't really care about you and me.
Okay.
Right? What they really care about is the strength of their banks. They want the banks to be very strong, very solid, and they want all their investments and all their loans to be solid.
Right.
So they've inputted all these new rules to really just make sure that the banks are lending to people who are very comfortable and can afford it. Hence the new rules. Now, reality is, with the new rules, that the impact is not that significant. So going into January 1st, and so October, November, December, realtors, mortgage people, banks, they're all telling you, run out and buy now.
Right.
Get out there now, because you're not going to be able to afford anything January 1st.
Yeah.
I have had many people in my office in January getting pre-approved and saying, do we still really qualify for anything? So I could do it both ways for them and say, here, under the new rules, you qualify for, say, $500,000.
Right.
Under the old rules, you would have qualified for $550,000.
Yeah.
But really, how much do you want to borrow? Well, we only want to borrow $400,000.
Right.
So really, there's no impact, right? So it does prevent people from really maxing out, saying, I qualify for $550,000, so I'm going to buy a house for $550,000. Where now they're only going to qualify for $500,000, and in reality, their comfort level should have been in the $500,000 range anyway.
Right, right, and I agree with you. Most people do not want to borrow their maximum amount. When they come in to get pre-qualified, they don't want to borrow the maximum amount they can qualify for. They're usually much more conservative. There is the odd one.
There's the odd one, and even those people, in reality in Canada, they don't find themselves in trouble. Our arrears are just ridiculously low, but the new rules just make it that much tougher and more likely that they're going to get a house that they can actually afford.
Right, right. Now, I don't know if this does tie into the new rules, but it's the mortgage rate. Like when a client calls you up and says, what are the rates today, Dwight?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, how do you answer that question?
So, the first thing I say, that's a great question, and because rates are affected. Some of the new rules that came in 3 years ago really split up the buckets where the banks are lending. So you've got high ratio mortgages. So those are people that are buying with minimum down.
Yeah.
You've got conventional mortgages. So those are people that are buying with a big down payment, 20% or more. You've got non-purchases. So those are mortgages that people already own their home and they're refinancing to get rid of debt, or they're refinancing to do some home upgrades or whatever, or their mortgages is up for renewal and they're renewing. So there's all different buckets that the banks are lending in, and for us to intelligently answer, what is the rate that you're asking me? They say, what is your rate? Well, what is it you want to do? So if we find out they're purchasing, then we say, so what do you do for a living? Because there's different buckets of people. As far as self-employed people, maybe don't prove their income enough, doesn't mean we can't get them a great mortgage, but it may not be the lowest rate mortgage. Or what is your credit like? Because now, under the new rules, not the current new rules, but some of the rules that came in 7 years ago, where they eliminated banks from doing low beacon score people, those mortgages we can still do, but again, the rate's going to be impacted. So when they call in and say, what's your best rate? Well, I don't know.
Yeah, I know.
It depends on you. You have to tell me a lot more about yourself before I can say what is my best rate for what it is that you want to do.
Right.
So we have to ask a lot more questions. And I really don't like to do that over the phone. I'd rather get them in, sit them. I can say, you know what, as a mortgage broker, my job is to get you the best rate possible for your particular situation. So come on in, let's figure it out, and let's see what the best rate is and the best mortgage is for you.
Yeah, I know it's complicated. I didn't realize that 7 years ago, depending on your credit rating as to what rates you would get. I didn't know when those changes came in.
Well, Bank of Canada no longer allowed banks to do mortgages for people with a sub 600 beacon score. Whereas before, that was their call. If they wanted to do somebody with really low credit score, they could. Now they can't.
Right. Now, what's creating a beacon score? How does, this magical number that people are working with?
Well, beacon scores, and first of all, as a mortgage professional, we get a different score than maybe the guy that's doing the car loans. So a customer will say, I got my credit done at, I was in at the local car dealership.
Yeah.
They did a credit and they told me my credit score is 624. Well, when I run a credit score, it's specific to mortgages because that's the way we're licensed and that's the way our Equifax is set up. So we're going to get a different score. Our credit reports that we get do have 5 different scores, and they're all relevant, but the beacon score is the one everybody talks about, and ours is different. So what drives a beacon score predominantly would be, first of all, major derogatories are a beacon score killer. So if you're not paying your bills, you're going to have a crappy credit score.
Okay,
so
pay your bills.
Right? Pay your bills. And if you're carrying high balances on all your credit cards and credit lines, you're going to have a really low credit score. If you have almost no credit, but you have one little blip. So let's say you have one credit card with a $300 limit, and you've got a cell phone that went in the toilet last year, you're going to have a really low credit score. Whereas that cell phone may not have an impact if you have 10 other things that are all real good. So high balances, major derogatories, missed payments, those are credit beacon score killers.
Okay, and then that's obviously one of the rules now affecting whether people get mortgages or not. Now, you talk about the banks having these rules. Who are the banks? What are the banks?
So we're talking about federally regulated institutions. So we're talking about any major bank. So with the word bank, TD Bank, Scotia Bank, CIBC. Okay. Those are all banks. We're talking about trust companies. We're talking about mortgage companies. So mortgage companies are federally regulated. Okay. And there's many, many mortgage companies. Credit unions are provincially regulated, so they can abstain from some of the rules that are put in by the federal government. Right. Now, usually they don't, but they could. Okay, so they can work in their own world if they want to. If they want to, yes.
All right. Now, there's banks that have their own money to lend out and banks that don't, right?
Correct. So a mortgage company. Yeah. And I don't want to use a name, but there are companies out there that do mortgages only. We call them monoline lenders because they only do one thing. They're a one-trick pony. They do mortgages only, and they're not lending their own money. They don't have their own book. So a bank lends in their own money, their investors' money. So
Right.
they have people that deposit money and they lend it out. So
Does one have a better rate than the other, or what's the
they
difference?
can, they probably don't. The monoline lenders, because that's all they do, they tend to be more aggressive on rate, because if they have to have a great rate, otherwise why would you use them?
Right.
Right? So they tend to be a little more aggressive on rate. A bank has the flexibility to go as cheap as they want to, because it is their own money. But generally speaking, their posted rates, as opposed to a non-bank, the posted rates at the non-bank will be a little slightly lower.
Right.
They'll have a little more flexibility.
Yeah, because I mean, banks are in the business to make money. We see that with the profits they make every quarter. You know, we hear about it in the radio, or
Billions, yes.
billions. Yeah, yeah. So they're, and that money, a good chunk of it's coming through mortgage interest.
Yes, although the mortgage portfolio isn't the most profitable part of a bank, for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, the credit card, the daily banking, that's where they make their big money. They like getting the mortgages because then that usually brings them a new client, and then they can cross-sell all these other products.
Oh, that's the motivation.
That's the motivation. But
Okay.
but the mortgages do not make a lot of money for banks.
Geez, you'd think with all the money you spend on interest on a mortgage that the bank's going to be making a killing on that.
Well, they're not. Your mortgage rates are like 3.5% right now, right? Whereas your credit card, you're paying them 18, and you're happy to do it.
Oh, not me.
or your car loans, you're paying
Yeah.
7, 8, 9%. Unsecured
That's true.
credit lines are all 6%, 7%, 8%, and again, and you're happy to do it. Lots of people have credit lines that are used up all the time, and you have this $10,000 credit line, and you're paying 8%, 9% on it. Whereas mortgages are only 3.5% right now, or variable rates are closer to 3 or under 3.
Yeah, so historically low rates right now.
Historically low rates, right?
While credit cards are still up at
Historic highs.
why? It's so puzzle to me. We don't have to get
Right.
into that, but why
No,
credit
no.
cards stays up there while the mortgage rates stay, get so low. But
There's no logic.
yeah, so we got this new stress test that's out there. Started January 1. You're saying people have to qualify at about 2% more than what the actual rate is. So it's like an
Correct.
imaginary rate, right?
Yeah, it's a window into the future. Should rates rise by 2%, 5 years from now, can you still afford this?
Right.
Assuming you're not going to get a raise, assuming a lot of
Yeah.
things aren't going to change, can you still afford this if rates are 2% higher 5 years from now?
So it keeps things a little more conservative and
Conservative is the magic word. Our banks are very conservative, always have been, always will be. Hence why we didn't take the crushing blows that they did in the U.S. when they had the crash 10 years
yeah,
ago.
so that's why we didn't get hit as hard, I guess, because it's a little more conservative.
We were more lucky than smart, but we didn't get hit.
Okay, now we're going to take a break in a bit, in just a few moments. And a couple of things we'll cover when we get back. One is some solutions to people with these new stress tests. And maybe we'll talk a little bit about where we think things are going to be going in the future as well.
Sure,
All
sounds
right.
good.
Thanks, Dwight.
All
And
right.
we'll be right back just after this. Welcome back to Closing Day. My name is Jeff Delgrand, your host, and with me today I've got Dwight Trafford, principal broker from the Mortgage Center here in Orangeville, and we're talking about the new mortgage rules and how it affects everybody. And what we want to get onto now is a little bit about what somebody should do to prepare for the new mortgage rules. Is it much different than what they should have done before, or what would you suggest?
Well, there was a time
Yeah.
when if you wanted to buy a house, you would make sure you had no debt. You would save up some money for a down payment or hit up mom or dad for a down payment and go out and buy a house.
Right.
And I think we kind of got away from that. A lot of young people getting married and they have their debt from school, they have their credit card debt, they have their car payments, and I'm making good money, so I'm going to buy a house, and I don't really need much down. And there were ways of actually buying a house with zero down. There was CMHC approved loans that actually were 100% financing for probably about 3 years. Then they eliminated that,
Right.
and then the banks were doing the cashback mortgages for zero down to accommodate people with no down payment. But today that's not reality. Today you do need a down payment. So what I would say to young people, first-time buyers, is get rid of your debt, because today they calculate debt and is very impactful. So if you have a credit card, so let's say you have a credit card balance of $5,000.
Right.
Or let's use $10,000, and maybe you've got a deal on the interest rate, and your minimum payment really only is $100. But
Right.
in fact, what the banks use is $300. So maybe you have a student line of credit, and the minimum payment may only be $80. It's a $10,000 student line of credit, and you've got a deal. You only have to pay $80 a month, and you're just going to work that through. But really, when the banks are calculating payments based to qualify you for a mortgage, they're using $300. So all those little debts that you have do accumulate and add up to really impact how much you're going to qualify for.
Right.
So it is good, if you want to buy a house, get rid of as much of your debt as you can and get a down payment. Because again, the rules are more lenient for somebody with a bigger down payment. And obviously you'll qualify for more if you have a bigger down payment.
Yeah.
Now, sure, you can get a co-signer, you can get mom or dad to sign on for your mortgage, and that's one way around it. The days of renting out your basement and using that income, you can't do that anymore. You can, but it's a lot tougher, and it doesn't help as much as it used to.
Right.
So, my suggestion is to, get pre-approved. Find out, go in to see your bank or your mortgage broker.
Yeah.
What do I qualify based on my life right now? And if I qualify for $300,000, but really there's nothing in my area for $300,000, so I need to get into $400,000, what do I need to do for that?
Right.
So maybe it's get rid of a few credit cards. Maybe wait till you get a raise or a better job. Or maybe if there's two of you, maybe your spouse is only working part-time. Maybe they need to be working full-time to qualify for what you need.
Yeah.
But, we can help you, or a bank should be able to help you figure out what you're going to need to do to get into that house of the price range that needs to be because of where you want to live. I'm not suggesting that your first house should be a castle and you say, I need to have a castle. All my friends have a castle. I want to move into a castle. If I can't have a castle, I'm not going to buy a house. But the reality is, if you want to live and be in the Orangeville area or the Brampton area or Shelburne area, the prices are what they are.
Yeah.
So if you want to qualify for a house in that price range or in that area, you might have to make some life changes.
Right, a few sacrifices, and I think that's always been the same. The first year of someone owning a house, for example, is always a tough year. After that, don't know whether you just get used to it or what it is, but it just seems easier after you get through that first year.
Hopefully.
So, yeah.
Your first year, you're buying furniture, you're setting up your budget, you're figuring things out, you're finding what your utilities are, and you might, after a year, now you're settled in, you have your budget set up, maybe you've trimmed a few things.
Yeah, yeah. And now people can get help from parents for down
Absolutely.
payments.
Yeah.
What other ways can they get help?
Well, they get help from parents as far as income.
Yeah.
So if parents still are working and make good money, then we can use that income added to theirs. Now the parents are going to be a homeowner together with them, so they're going to be on title with them for now.
Right.
They can be removed down the road, but that would also help them. But the reality is, if you have to use the parents' income to qualify for a house, you can't afford that house.
Okay.
That is the reality.
Yes.
Because your income doesn't support the payments on that house.
Right.
So we have to get mom or dad.
So there has to be a reason why you would do that, logically, right?
So it really doesn't make sense. Do you really want to buy a house that you can't afford? And so maybe it's better just to save up more down or get rid of some debt to make the affordability. But again, a good mortgage broker or a bank can help them figure out what they do qualify for and what their comfort level is going to be, or how to get to a position where they could qualify for that house.
Yeah, that's really good advice.
Right.
You know, sometimes people have got visions of grandeur, and I'll get mom and dad to sign on this so I can own this
Like,
castle.
I like the idea of using a cosigner because sometimes young people or first-time buyers maybe just haven't established enough credit. So they make enough money, they just don't have enough credit. So we put mom or dad on to help with that.
Right.
Or maybe they've had an accident, a credit accident. I like to call
Credit
that.
accident? Okay.
Credit
We'll
accident.
keep it at that.
They've, they in their first apartment, they had a Rogers bill, and they moved out, didn't think about it, thought all their roommates were going to cover it. They didn't, but it was in their name. They moved away. Now Rogers is chasing them, or Kudo, or whoever it is, because they legitimately owed the money, and they forgot about it. And being young, they didn't really care. And now there's a judgment or a collection from Bell or TELUS or whatever for whatever that was, and that's impacting their credit. So again, putting a cosigner on to offset that is not a bad idea. Putting a cosigner on because you can't afford it, that's going to impact your lifestyle.
Yes, yeah.
You're going to be eating a lot of craft dinner. You're never going to go out. You're definitely not going to save up. And you do want to start saving money when you're young. And you can't do it if you're paying more for a house than what you can realistically afford.
And that's good advice. Yeah, people could follow that. They have less problems later in life.
So the problem is, and what the people say to me, yes, Dwight, but my mortgage payment on the new house is going to be $1,200 a month.
Yeah.
And property taxes are another $200 a month. Utilities another $100, so it's $1,500 a month. But I'm paying $1,800 a month in rent right now. Why shouldn't I own a house?
Yes, yeah, that's a good question.
That's a great question, and that is a problem. The fact is, rents are very high right now. So and I have no answer for that, other than rent something cheaper, or I don't know. It's a problem.
Find a cosigner to buy a house.
Find a cosigner to buy a house.
Yeah. Now, for the last 29 years, has it been like more rules every year just get added on, or is there sort of swings where they add rules, they take them away, they add rules, they take them away?
Well, for sure, the pendulum swings both ways.
Okay.
And I have seen it go both ways. When I talk about 15 years ago was a wild, wild west of lending, it seemed like every year they were making it easier to borrow.
Right.
So sure, 25, 30 years ago, it was very, very tough to borrow. And there was a real appetite with CMHC and the banks and to lend out more money. Mortgages were very profitable, and they wanted to lend out more money. So they kept making it easier, giving us longer amortizations, 25, 30, 35, 40-year amortizations, products for self-employed that you didn't have to show much income on your tax returns, just prove that you're self-employed, will give you a mortgage. Rates plummeted. There was lots of things in the pipeline to make things easier. And then that started switching. And right now, so maybe 15 years ago, the pendulum was way out here that anybody could get a mortgage and at a great rate and for the maximum amount, whereas now it's just almost the opposite of that. So we will see that ease up. I don't know when. Probably not anytime soon, but that will ease up for sure.
Right.
Rules that are put in place, we use words like Finance Canada or the Office of the Superintendent of Financial Institutions, but these are people, right?
Right.
There's just people, and they have opinions, and they have agendas, and they have reasons why they want to do things. And people change, people come, people go.
Yes.
So as people change, as people come, as people go, their opinions change, and they decide they want to run things a little different. So the governor, the governor of the Bank of Canada right now is saying we need to raise rates for whatever reason. It's obviously to control the economy, but that's his opinion. So he's raising rates based on his opinion. These new rules came in because of people's opinions. We don't want to be in the jackpot that the Americans are in, so we're putting in all these new rules. Now down the road, we'll get people in to say, you know what, we need to make borrowing easier for people because there's not enough people buying houses. So we need to lighten up, loosen up the reins, loosen up the rules, and that filters down to the banks. And And that is what happens. So right now it's just the people that are in now have tightened everything up to make the banks real safe. But we may get a group of people in there that are care more about Canadians buying houses than they do about the stability of the banks. So that'll change.
So it depends on who's making the rules and what their feelings are that day.
Yep. People are people, and they have their opinions and their agendas, right? And that changes all the time.
So if somebody is ready to buy a house or wants to buy a house today, would you advise them to do it or wait?
Absolutely, they should do it if they can.
Yeah.
It's a double whammy when you. So even if you bought a house today for $400,000,
yeah,
and it was still worth $400,000 10 years from now, right? Was it still a good idea to buy that house if it didn't appreciate in value?
Right.
Right? Is it a good idea? So you buy a house today for $400,000, you put down your 40 grand, you've got a $360,000 mortgage. 10 years from now, you've paid that mortgage down to probably $260,000.
Yeah.
The house is still worth $400,000. You're worth 140 grand. 140 grand more than you would have been worth if you'd have rented.
Yes.
Even if you'd have rented for $200 or $300 less per month, you wouldn't have saved that $300 a month, likely. It'd be nice if you did, but you probably didn't.
Right,
reality is 10 years from now, even if house prices didn't appreciate at all, you're still $160,000 ahead of the game in that example.
And that's a house, yeah, you say don't appreciate it all.
If it didn't appreciate it
over
all.
a 10-year period. And we know prices go up and down, but
yeah,
over 10 years, I think you're...
It may.
Yeah.
We've had a significant increase in house values in the last 3 years. So, obviously that's not going to continue. And houses may not appreciate in the next 10 years. It's very possible.
Yeah.
But still, you're making money because you're paying down your mortgage.
Right.
You and maybe whoever else is in your house helping you pay the mortgage. If you have a tenant or a renter or whatever, they're helping you, and that's all helping you pay down your mortgage.
All right, so nobody should be afraid of buying a house now. And we can work around the mortgage rules. You say there's ways you can put mortgages together still. Doesn't seem to be hurting purchasers all that much.
I haven't had to decline a mortgage in the last 3 months because of the new rules.
Well, and if someone gets declined from a bank, they can go see a mortgage broker. I mean,
yes.
That's a little bit of a plug, but it is the reality.
Yeah, it is reality. Yeah, we have more lenders, and again, every lender has their own little niche. Every lender has their own little rules, ways to make things work a little easier for this client or that client.
But working with a broker is another option for people.
It's the best option.
Okay, well, Dwight, that was a lot of information in a short period of time. Really appreciate that.
Great. Happy to be here.
It's been great having you on. Quite an honor. Thank you very much. And thank everyone out there for tuning in to Closing Day, and we will see you next time.